Welcome to the newest episode of High Side, Low Side. This is episode 8 of season 6. We have got a doozy for you today. We're going to jump into not the news. We've got a bunch of information coming out of EICMA, some of which Zach and I would like to discuss with you, our audience. We are going to then jump into the main discussion on motorcycle navigation. And our guest for this discussion is going to be the one and only Justin Bradshaw. You'll hear more about him in just a moment here. And we, as always, have a t-shirt winner for the one lucky person who was kind enough to leave us a review over on Apple Podcast, as well as a fun section of comments from you, the High Side, Low Side listeners that have been kind enough to send Zach and I an email. But before we do any of that, first we need a mention of our sponsor, Motul.
This time around, Spurgeon got a story for you and the lovely viewers and listeners. My friend Ari and I are riding across Wyoming for an episode of CTXP. More information on that in a later episode. And our chains are taking an absolute beating. They're all covered in mud. They're jumping off sprockets. It's horrible. I reach into the toolkit packed for this very adventure, and what did I find but a can of Motul chain lube that you, my friend Spurgeon Dunbar, had sent me in that care package a couple seasons ago. So douched off the chain, off we went. It was great. I think everyone should have a friend like Spurgeon Dunbar, but if you don't, you can at least use Motul cleaning and lubrication products on your chain, and your chain might be as happy as mine was.
You can find that over on RevZilla.com/Motul. And while you're over there, you want to check out the RevZilla's RPM program that stands for Riders Plus membership. A lot of great benefits from, 2-day shipping to, free returns, all for the low price of right around $5 a month. But the main benefit we want to touch on today is the REVER app. You can get the pro version of REVER with their RPM membership. And we're going to tie in and give you more information as to what REVER can do for you as a motorcyclist looking to navigate your next trip. So you can learn more about that over at RevZilla.com/RPM.
Okie dokie. Welcome everybody again to Season 6, Episode 8 of High Side, Low Side. What we like to do during this section of the show, of course, is talk about what we call not the news. In other words, you're not going to get breaking stories from us here on High Side, Low Side due to our production schedule and laziness, but we can tell you what to keep an eye out for in general. And it's hard to go through a November in the world of motorcycling without talking about EICMA, Spurge.
Yeah,
and what does EICMA stand for exactly? I'm putting you on the spot. Do you know what it stands for?
Not a clue. I know it's in...
me neither. Something like Motorcycle Association show, stuff.
It's in Milan, Italy. So for like 1 week a year, Milan's not the fashion capital of the world. It's the motorcycling capital of the world. But... keep in mind that we do give you all the breaking news over on Common Tread.
Yes.
So make sure you're subscribed to the email list over there. And that's kind of where Zach and I got our information for this program. So out of all the bikes that were announced at EICMA, there were two ones that we wanted to chew on, starting with Suzuki has introduced a new engine. And if you are dedicated High Side, Low Side listeners, you know that Zach and I have critiqued Suzuki in this season for not doing enough to evolve their own product line. And clearly, they're listening to us. Are they not, Zach?
I mean, there's so much evidence now that Suzuki brass listened to High Side, Low Side, and they thought, well, Spurgeon and Zack are very disappointed in the fact that we have not, as a company, released a new engine in quite some time.
So listen to the evidence, folks. Within 2 months ago, we released an episode entitled, What's Happening with Suzuki. Fast forward 2 months, they introduced a new engine. I mean...
And that's approximately the amount of time it takes for a company to develop an entirely new engine, by the way. 6 to 8 weeks.
So I think...
Anyway.
If I had a gavel right now, I would bang it on the table.
So obviously Suzuki had this brewing in the back rooms of Hamamatsu, and we, as massive critics of Suzuki, could not be more excited that this new engine has debuted. 776cc parallel twin that is being used in a new V-Strom 800, as well as a sporty naked bike called the GSX-8S, which is designed to tie your tongue in a knot. Yeah,
I was doing that on Instagram Live the other day, or a promotion for Instagram. And I was like, the GSX-X, no, that's not right. It's definitely not easy to say.
The point is, I know that you are excited about a V-Strom because you're an adventure guy, and we would be remiss if we did not mention the Honda Transalp also, which is another 800-ish cc parallel twin. Is that right?
The amount of people that have sent me messages on Instagram asking if, like, my dad and I have talked about the new Suzuki V-Strom 800 yet was, like, record-breaking. And actually, at the time of this recording, my dad has yet to reach out to me and talk to me about the new V-Strom 800. Now, what I will say is that, there's a lot of technology that's being introduced to this particular model that really we haven't seen in earlier models of the V-Strom. This is going to have, you're looking at that traditional 21-inch front, 17 rear. It really seems to be aligning itself similarly to, maybe like a Tiger 900 / BMW F850 GS-esque light. It seems like it's getting some new electronics. It's getting, an adjustable suspension with almost 9 inches of travel. It's really going after that middleweight. They're claiming around 83 horsepower, 57 foot-pounds of torque.
You think
the biggest question is, should it be called a V-Strom or should it not be called a P-Strom? Like, can you call it a V-Strom anymore?
Oh, right, because of the engine. So instead of a V-twin, now it's a P-twin. So you think it should be called a P-Strom?
I do.
I get it. That's all things considered, a pretty funny joke.
It's not a joke. I want to start a hashtag called P-Strom, okay. And I want it. I think this is where Suzuki needs to continue to listen to us on the marketing side of things.
To take it to a more serious note, I think I'm surprised to hear you say you're comparing it to like a Tiger 900 or a BMW 850. This is more like Yamaha T7 and pretty a Touareg territory, isn't it? It's smaller.
No, I mean I would say that from a power standpoint,
how much horsepowers does it make?
83 horsepower, which is probably a little bit less. I mean, I would say it's probably a little bit more than the T7 and probably a little bit less than the F850 GS. But when I'm looking
it's less than a Touareg also, isn't it?
No, I think a Touareg is in the 70s.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think. I don't know off the top of my head. I want to say Touareg is in the high 70s. But from a weight standpoint, this is coming in at 507 pounds is the claimed wet weight for this motorcycle.
So it weighs as much as a Ducati Desert X, basically, which makes 110 horsepower.
But I'm thinking of like where this really compares from a holistic level, and it's somewhere to me.
It's too heavy to.
It's somewhere to me closer in the world of like an F850 GS is really kind of where I see this competing at, and it kind of looks similar too if you haven't seen the pictures. It has that kind of a look to it. But anyway,
well, to move it along here, which we need to do, the other news from EICMA include a Royal Enfield Super Meteor, which is a crew. They took that 650 engine used in the Continental and Interceptor models, and they put it in a Meteor cruiser looking thing. There's a Honda CL500, which is sort of a scrambler thing from Honda.
Built off what looks to be the Rebel 500 platform.
Looks like it's built off a Rebel 500. Yep. And then some new Ducati scramblers. Again, to read up on all this, if you have not already, we would very much encourage you to go to Common Tread at RevZilla.com and check out the coverage we have there. And, of course, look around other places on the internet as well. Why not?
Yeah, you mentioned it in passing, but that Honda Transalp is actually smack dab aimed at pretty much what the Suzuki V-Strom is. And I do think that there's a debate to be had. I don't think we need to tackle it today. But if you look at the specs for that Transalp, it's darn near close to what the Africa Twin was from a power standpoint when the Africa Twin was first released in America in 2016. So I want our audience to think about this and maybe shoot us an email, maybe leave a comment below. But is the Transalp too close to the Africa Twin within Honda's line? That's something that I want to unpack a little bit at some point in time, and maybe we do it with a comment that one of our educated listeners writes in with.
Perhaps. For now, we should move on with this podcast that is not debating ADV bikes from EICMA, but rather talking about navigation on motorcycles. And to do that, we're bringing in our colleague, Justin Bradshaw, who, aside from being our collective connection to the REVER company and app platform, which is a sister company to RevZilla in the same family of brands, he's also quite an experienced motorcyclist, and hopefully he'll have lots of interesting stuff to tell us about navigation.
With a long history of navigation far beyond REVER that I actually learned about doing the research for this podcast. So super excited to get Justin on. Let's bring him on. We'll hit up a lightning round of questions to give you, the audience, a little bit of an introduction into who Justin is. And then we're going to get started on motorcycle navigation, and we got a lot to unpack today.
All right. There he is, Justin Bradshaw. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us, my man. Are you ready to talk about navigation or what?
You know I am.
Right.
My favorite topic.
Yeah, you I think have plenty of light to shed on the topic.
Yeah, you must be really exciting at
Spurgeon
cocktail
myself.
parties, right? You're just like, guys, let's talk about navigation again. And they're like, Justin,
Yeah,
it's
who
a
wants to
Friday
go
night.
somewhere?
Come on. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
What?
it makes it easy winning arguments with my wife when she's like, "It's right," and I was like, "You don't want to argue with me."
Right, exactly.
About
Show me your
navigation,
GPX
Dan.
tracks. Yeah. So to get to know you a little bit better for our sake, but mostly for the audience's sake, Justin, we're going to do a quick lightning round of questions which we did not share with you, as you know. And they're going to be pretty easy, spoiler alert, but get ready to think on your feet and give people a little background on who you are as a motorcyclist. So without further ado, how did you get into motorcycling and what was your first motorcycle?
Like a lot of people, I think, family, my brothers, my dad, everybody in my family rides. So it started when I was a kid on, I think, technically, if you count like a quad, that was my first thing, when I could barely walk. But then after that, PW50, very typical coming through
Nice,
moto
yeah.
journey. But off-road,
Okay.
I was actually born in San Antonio, so I grew up with like Kent Howerton, those guys. I don't know if you know them from old school factory Suzuki days, but that's where my family was good friends with them. And Jeff Ward and those guys raced my brother, so I kind of
Nice.
looked
So
up to them.
So it sounds like you've been riding for a long time. At what point did you decide that you were going to make motorcycling your profession? And what was your first job in the motorcycling industry?
That's a really good question. My first job, well, really Butler Maps was my first job in the motorcycle industry. So I rode around the world in 2007. So I spent a long time, many, many months on a motorcycle. When I got back, I was like, well, I need to do something continuing in motorcycles. So I started Butler Maps with some folks, and that was really the first motorcycle gig. Before that, I was just trying to make money like any kind of college kid, anywhere I possibly could, so that I could pay for race tires and that sort of stuff.
Right on.
What
So-
motorcycle did you take around the world very quickly?
KTM 950 Adventure.
I'm gonna let that one sit right there, and we can move on. Zach, next question.
Yeah.
No, that's the precursor to your motorcycle, Spurgeon, the sibling to my 950 Supermoto. So I can hear the velvety tones of its exhaust as we speak. So you founded Butler Maps, and you are a founding member of REVER, correct?
Yep.
So how did that transition happen from kind of paper maps to apps?
Yeah. Well, my business partners at Butler, and I mean, we always knew that paper maps was probably not the end all to that business idea.
Right.
It just happened to be, frankly, like easier. We weren't tech people when we started that. Apps didn't even exist when we started Butler Maps, so it wasn't even a thing. It was really like, well, when that got some traction and we kind of became experts on where to go ride your motorcycle, people wanted that content digitally. So it was really just a lot of questions of when can I put this on my Garmin? How do I get Butler routes on my Garmin? We tried some things over the years with that. And then, when apps became a thing and mobile started taking off, it became clear that, well, maybe Garmin's aren't the future. Maybe apps and phones are the future. So kind of started working on those ideas soon after the App Store. Well, not that soon. A few years after the App Store was, even a thing that people knew about.
Right. And to be clear, since we're talking about it, it's probably the right time to be clear about this. Butler Maps is associated with the REVER phone app now in some capacity, right? Can you see Butler
Yep.
Maps or see some
You
Butler
sure
Map
can.
data on REVER? Yeah.
Yep, you sure can. Yep. Yeah, and we started as one business. REVER and Butler were under one umbrella. The Butler Map stuff was a little more mature. We had distribution and we had lots of motorcycle stores and other bookstores
Right.
and stuff selling the maps. And so, that was a running business when we started REVER, and they were kind of operated by myself and our partners. And then at some point we split ways, and my current partner Mark and I focused on the tech, and the other guys focused on the paper, and we just licensed the Butler Maps content in REVER now. So it's the only place you can get it digitally still.
Yeah, I want to unpack that a little bit more later on, because I'm actually a huge fan of Butler, and we talked a second ago when we were introducing you around the fact that I had no idea as we started this process of bringing you on as a guest of the podcast that you were one of the founding members of Butler, and that was something that was extremely exciting to me, because Butler Maps have played a huge role in my journey in motorcycle navigation, and I want to unpack some of that later on in the episode. But the last question for this particular round is, what was your longest motorcycle trip?
Which I feel like you touched on, to be honest.
Yeah, I kind of spoiled that one, didn't I? Yeah.
You did. But
unless you rode around the world twice, and then we don't know.
Fair enough. True. Did you count the miles, or what do you say when people ask you that question?
That was like 30,000 miles. That one.
And how long did it take you?
That was like 3.5-ish months, 4 months.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Fairly quick in the scheme
you
of
made pretty good
riding
time,
around the
man.
world. Yeah, we did. Because we wanted to ride. I mean, it was, I had a budget, and every day that I wasn't at home working, making money, and that was chewing away at the budget. So I didn't kind of have the indefinite, I'd just be on the road. And I wanted to ride my motorcycle. So every day I was like, well, I guess we ride, and we got to keep going west. So we ride west, and that's about how long it takes.
And how many people were with you? Was it you and a couple of folks?
It was me and my dad, actually.
Wow. Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
He was also on a 950 adventure. Not the same 950 adventure, just to be clear. Different 950 adventures.
It was a two-up
Two
ride.
guys, 2 bikes. Gotcha. Okay. Right on. Wicked. Well, that's those obviously hopefully give people a little snapshot into your background and why we're interested in talking to you about navigation, because there are a lot of different ways to get around in the world and on a motorcycle, and you've experimented with a lot of them. I feel like you're going to have a good answer to this question. The first kind of thing we wanted to throw out as a conversation topic is a moment or a journey or a time when you wish you had better navigation. Like, I don't know, a time when you were in a situation where you thought, I wish I was using GPS, or I was using a paper map, or I was using a phone, and boy, I wish I was using something else because I'm lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any good tales to go there? I feel like you do.
There's lots. There's lots. In general, though, that's why we started Butler Maps, because honestly, it was like every time I went on a ride, I wish, not necessarily that I had better navigation per se, although that's part of it. I just wish I knew where the hell I was going. It was like, where is that road? Is that one good? We used to do trips to California with my dad and my uncle, and they spent years riding around California, and so they know stuff, but they still didn't know everything. So that was the impetus of Butler anyway. It was like, well, if you're riding, you're not just trying to get from A to B the quickest way. You're trying to find the coolest way, and it's hard to know where every cool road is. No one was really showing anybody where all the cool roads were. So that's what we did with Butler. Right. But as far as like specific navigation goes, I had an old school, original, I don't know. We didn't even have a GPS, by the way. We rode around the world. But when we got back, I was doing an adventure ride with my wife. I remember we were out near in southern Utah by Capitol Reef. And I remember going, we're south of I-70, and we could go all the way, take the boring straight road to this town and then take another straight road left, or we could just cut straight through the desert. And like my nav didn't work great. Like it was just a very crude, simple, not very detailed map. And we got out, 30 miles into the desert further and got so buried like above the exhaust on the 952 up in the sand wash, and I thought, we're really freaking far away, and we are going to spend the night out here. My wife is not going to be stoked. She wasn't even my wife at the time, and we were wet. So that was definitely like, man, if I had just had something that told me that, it was actually like 100 miles to I-70, not like the 30 that was in my head, that would have saved the day.
I feel like I'm getting a little window into why maybe she doubts your navigation sometimes, even though
that was the only time it's ever happened. I'm just going to go and say that was the one and only time.
Right. Fair enough.
It's
okay, what
I
about?
think No, I think like the theme of like almost running out of gas is probably something that a lot of motorcyclists can associate. You know, when it comes to like their navigational follies, is when I remember sitting on Route 50, which, if you're not aware, when it cuts across Nevada, there it's called the loneliest road in America.
That.
Yeah,
because
there's like
motorcyclists up there before.
Yeah, there's like 3 towns, and I remember I had to stop and like knock on a farmer's door. And like the farmers in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, off of Route 50, aren't the kind of people you just go up and knock on their door and expect them to be kind and caring folk. They're a little bit like they're out there in the middle of nowhere for a reason. They don't want to be bothered.
Right.
And the guy that answered the door was like, "You need to get off my property." And I'm like, "I will give you $10 for like a gallon of gas, like out of that rusty lawnmower." And he's like, I'll say it one more time. "You need to get off my property." And I'm like, okay, cool.
Wow.
But it's like, I think the running out of gas thing is definitely a fear. What I would say is that like, I think that I have examples of when navigation has gone wrong and I've ended up in the wrong town, or I've almost been out of gas. There was one though where I was in Green River, Wyoming on a cross country trip, and I was trying to find a very specific road. And to be clear, the navigation for this trip was I had like an old road, and I actually have all of this stuff laid out on the desk because I save everything. But I had this old road atlas with all these handwritten directions for a cross-country trip. And by having a wrong turn, I ended up talking to this guy at a gas station who was like, "Oh, the road you're looking for is behind an old graveyard." And then he jumped in this like old beat up Cadillac and drove me to this, like I followed behind him. He drove me up to this graveyard. We ended up like hanging out for a while, and he's like, "Well, there's the road. You have to go through the graveyard, and like the road starts on the other side." And I was like, this was awesome. So I think for me, my point is that there are times in a motorcycle trip where when the navigation goes wrong, you either end up with a better story, or it kind of leads you to like experience something you might not have experienced if the navigation would have been perfect.
100%.
That's the when lost is not a bad word. The Spurgeon Dunbar story.
No, but I think there's probably a lot of examples of like, yes, there's plenty of times where like I wish that I had better navigation. You know, and I think that even when I plan out trips now, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, like I do use, you know, Butler through the REVER app as a main planning tool for a lot of my on-road trips especially. But like I always try to leave a little bit of room open for interpretation. Like I don't want to just plan everything out where it's like, this is my agenda and I am going to stick to it very rigorously. I like to leave things open-ended for like, I don't know, like that road over there looks kind of interesting. Let's see where it goes for a hot minute.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What about you, Zach?
Gotta leave room for magic for sure. And that's part of motorcycling. Period. Honestly, and as the map and app guy, it seems crazy to say that, but I 100% agree, and I do that a lot. Well, like I said, we didn't even have nav riding around the world. It was 100% that. It was we'd show up in towns. I had not a single reservation. We camped most of the time, but when we did go to cities, and you know what happened every single time without fail. Somebody on a motorcycle or a car, you know, motorcycle driving the car would recognize us and go, "Huh, those guys don't look like they're from around here, but they're motorcyclists and we're part of the same tribe regardless." And we stayed at more people's houses and motorcycle clubhouses and yurts and like the craziest places. And that never, ever would have happened if we were just following a route and very specific and just bouncing
or if
from
you had a spreadsheet
reservation.
with
no way.
hotel reservations in and stuff like that. Yeah, fair enough. That's good. Yeah. Well, yeah. The story I was going to share about being lost or wishing I had better navigation was being in. I did a ride. I was in Monaco, and I was
horrible place
in the city. Yeah, and I needed to be in another place in the city. And it's very confusing. It's very like hilly, and there oftentimes you're on a road and you're like, well, I need to be down on that other road, and I can see it, but I don't know how to get there because this is like an MC Escher drawing of like I don't know how to get where I'm. And my phone didn't work because it was foreign, and my brain didn't work because the signs were in different languages, and it was just sort of like an interesting. Like I remember the feeling, and I remember. You know, and I never felt like I was in danger, obviously. It's like I'm in society. Everything's going to be fine. But it was an interesting kind of type of panic where I'm sort of like, I need to get somewhere. Like I'm going to be late or I'm going to screw this up if I don't just get to this place. And I'm like, I'm already there. I'm in it reminded me of the joke about the about the blonde on the guy comes to the side of the river and there's a blonde on the other side of the river and he says, how do I get to the other side of the river? And she says, you're on the other side of the river. Stupid joke. But like, it reminded me of that. Like, you're already where you need to be. But you're not where you need to be. You have to get somewhere that's really close by. And I was totally flummoxed. And yeah, I guess we'll talk more about sort of urban navigation versus off-road being lost navigation. But I remember thinking that was an interesting psychological dilemma to be in, to be like, it's not that I'm lost. I know where I am, but I need to be somewhere else where I am. And I can't figure out how to do that. Well, it's not even that far away.
I think it's super interesting because, and we're going to kind of roll into the second topic here in a second, but like, we take for granted in 2023 that if you're in an urban area and you need to go somewhere, you can pull out your phone and you can type in an address. And, I was sharing this story when we were in pre-production that like when I first moved to LA, I took a job as a motorcycle courier and I lied on the application and I said that I knew, I knew LA and I had been living in LA for about 5 days. But they had a thing called a Thomas Guide. And I don't know if either of you guys remember this, but it was like a giant thick book and you would look in the back for an address and then it would tell you which page to go to. And then the pages were all squared off and gridded. And it was like the only way to, kind of navigate through a city if you didn't know where you were going. And it was fine, but it was also wildly inconvenient compared to now where we can pull out our phone, pull up Google Maps, type in an address, and we just follow the line all the way there.
It's amazing
come a long
how
way.
far we've come. Yeah.
Do you? So I guess we wanted to kind of qualify something, Justin, that we talked about before you joined, and see how you feel about it. In our head, there are sort of 3 buckets of navigation, of ways to get around. You have paper maps, which everyone is sort of familiar with and is arguably the oldest type. I mean, certainly predates motorcycling. And then you got your sort of conventional GPS, which is like a Garmin or a TomTom or something like that you would slap on your bike, which have been popular for motorcycle riders or adventurers for years now. And then phone applications where this sort of like piece of technology that a lot of us have in our pocket just does the heavy lifting, and you have an app that does that. Is that a fair kind of breakdown of the 3 sort of like pillars of motorcycle navigation in your mind?
I mean, you're missing smoke signals and stars, but
so yeah, okay. Actually, I mentioned stars. Remember, Spurge laughed at me, but
I didn't laugh at you. But no, actually, so I have so there's a pile of stuff, and for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm just going to hold things up, and I'll try to describe it. But I have 2 piles here, and I have a desk at my home office, and I have a desk at my office here in RevZilla HQ. And this was the folder that I pulled out of my filing cabinet, and it's stacked full of everything from like maps of Baja to like the LAB to V, like paper maps that unfold into this giant thing. But the one area that we forgot, and it is a valid form of navigation, especially in the off-road world, is roll chart navigation.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
So if you've never used a roll chart before, you have like a holder that mounts to your handlebar, and then it just tells you like you use like the odometer, and then you try to navigate left and right based on what the roll chart says to do. So just want to
do you have much experience with roll charts, Justin?
Yeah, I've built some roll chart rallies.
Okay.
And done some stuff with Quinn Cody, who's if you're in the roll charty world, you know that guy. So yeah, it's I haven't done it in years, but I thoroughly enjoy it. It's something we should talk about because I think is a totally underrated way to ride a motorcycle and navigate.
Yeah, it's funny because we've talked about it in the last couple episodes, but for East Coast like enduro motorcycle racing, like a lot of it still is focused on like you use the roll chart to like figure out your times and set your times for where you're racing at.
It's a whole different mental like focus that it takes. It's cool.
Yeah.
Right. Well, while we're on the topic of the sort of buckets of navigation, from using the stars to paper maps to GPS to roll charts to phone apps, is there I remember a friend when I moved to San Francisco, did not have a smartphone. I didn't have maps on my phone at that point, and my friend did have an iPhone at the time. And his impression when we moved there was, man, you're going to learn the city so much faster than I am because I'm just going to look at my phone, but you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So you're going to learn. And do you think there's like, I don't know, is there something to be said for not using your phone to get around sometimes? That's a piece of motorcycle navigation that I get a kick out of sometimes, especially being in a city. It's just trying to like remember and figure out where you're going instead of having any help. But I don't know if that's like a brain stimulation that other people represent with, or if that's just me.
That's a good question. I don't know. I personally, yeah, I mean, maybe that's dying. We might be kind of the trail end of
the last
enthusiasts.
generation.
Yeah, the last generation, really, because we didn't grow up, with smartphones, and they kind of just came about, in middle age, so to speak, ish. But I totally agree. You learn a lot more by paying more attention to your surroundings.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just,
Right. Yeah, I remember taking a ride with a group years ago, and Ari was kind of the ringleader. And at some point, or like maybe after the ride or something, he said, "Yeah, the thing I don't like about that is that when people are following someone or something, they just like shut their brain off.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, well, I'm on a ride with this person and they know where they're going. So like, I'm not even going to pay attention." And I think that's like whether you're on a group ride with other people or you're following a GPS track or a phone app or whatever. I like the idea of sort of always having that in the back of your mind. Like, I'm just going to try to keep my keep my wits about me and keep my sense of direction in tune here as best I can, because it's no situation is foolproof, right?
Well, it's interesting.
Yes,
so the group of folks that I ride with oftentimes will pick on me because they'll be out there with either a GPS mounted or they'll have a GPS phone mount up. And specifically, if we're riding in areas in New Jersey, we have the Pine Barrens, which is a huge 200,000 acre off-road area, or out in central Pennsylvania, we have an area called Bald Eagle State Forest. And these are areas that I ride in all the time. And I am really good at not much, but like I'm good at, like, if I see an area, like I know where I'm at, and I know that if I go right here, this is where it takes me, and if I go left here, to the point where like 10% of the time I might have to pull up my phone or my GPS and check where I'm at, but I can usually navigate an entire route for a day of off-road riding, and people are like, how did you do that? But it's something that I think I work on. It's an active challenge for myself of like, I think I'm going to go out and just explore today. I'm going to go out and try and get lost. I'm going to see if I can remember this and work my way around it. But I think there's a lot of people that are probably listening to this episode that I think being lost instills fear at times. And, I guess a question that I would have for the two of you is, when you're out there and maybe you're riding off-road or you're on a motorcycle trip, like, is there a moment where not having a paper map or a GPS or something would instill fear? Or like, have you found yourself in that situation where, and how did you get out of it or resolve it?
I'm curious to hear Justin answer this question, being the map guy he is.
I 100% find myself in those situations, although truthfully less nowadays. But before the days of us running around with Butler Maps and REVER, for sure. But I wouldn't say it was fear. It was just the way it was. I don't know how to explain it. There was like wasn't any other alternative as I knew it. It was like I grew up following my dad around. Yeah, just reality. I grew up following my dad around the woods and following my brothers on paved roads and that sort of stuff. And I was like, well, they always seemed to figure it out. When I was a kid and younger, I just trusted them, and now people trust me too, I guess. But
did you ever have a panic moment? Did you ever have a moment where you're like, this is bad, and it might not end the way I want it to?
Aside from when you buried your bike and your wife in that sandwich.
That was a little bit of panic because we were way remote and we didn't have anything, like nothing, and we were wet. I honestly, I can't think of a time where I panicked because of somewhere we were. I snowmobile, or I should say I started getting into snowmobiling in the winter up here. I don't know, I went a dozen times last season alone, and I definitely panicked like 6 of those times. Because snow is just
that
it's just
seems like a
different.
situation
You're like,
where it
oh my
happens
God,
more often.
Yeah, you're way remote and you're not hiking out at anything, and nobody is coming along like just randomly down the road, right? You're not on a road. So I've felt that feeling, but not specifically on 2 wheels.
Zach, anything for you from a panic moment?
A panic moment? Aside from Lost in Monaco? No, I don't know. I think that I've been in some areas, like I've been riding by myself in really remote areas, and I've had that kind of tickle of like, I hope nothing goes wrong. Like that's the thing that tickles the back of my brain is like, as long as I have enough gas, I'm usually not that scared because I can always turn around and go the other way. It's when you're at the sort of point of no return, or you don't have enough fuel and you're kind of like, I don't know if I can go through here, and I don't know if I can get where I'm going. And if I don't get where I'm going, I'm going to be pooched. That's when I that's when I can't think of a specific moment of actual sort of like navigation panic. But I think the farther you get from society and people and safety and medical care, especially if you're by yourself, that's the thing that really gets me. And I will say that I like to think I'm not the type of person who would be like, oh, I don't know where I'm going. I'm freaking out. But I totally represent with that feeling of if you are looking at a phone screen or a GPS track or something like that, or even a paper map, and you're confident that you know where you're going, it does bring a calm, right? I mean, you feel so much better about yourself.
I think being out of gas is one. I think for me, especially off road, like being out of water is a panic moment for me. And I was in a situation. My worst panic was we were following someone with a GPS. We had a big group of riders out in the woods, and we came across one of our groups. That was a guy that was kind of like passing by, got a flat tire. 3 of us stopped to help him fix his flat tire. The rest of our group was like, we're gonna go back to the campsite. We're gonna get out of here. We helped the flat tire, and the sun's going down, end of a long day. And the leader of our little group, who was navigating via GPS, was like, all right, I found a shortcut back. So we go up this rocky trail, and this is all off road.
Yeah,
famous last words.
Yeah.
Like, I got a quick shortcut back. So we start coming down this trail, and the trail gets gnarlier and gnarlier to the point where we're kind of riding in this like aggressive downhill, like mountain stream almost. And he's like halfway down, we're like, we don't think this is right. It's getting dark. I'm on a 1090. He's on a Versys 650. And we had another guy with us on a KTM 690. Finally, he goes, I made a wrong turn. The left we were supposed to make was actually at the top of the hill. We're on this like old hiking trail. But
now you got to go back up.
There's no way back up. Like it was so vertical, and it was so wet and slimy that like we can't go back up. So we kept going down, and then like as the sun's going down, there's like these trees. So we're like, and I have to find a picture of this. Maybe we can put it up on screen. We're like laying the 1090 over and dragging it under trees. We ended up at like 9 o'clock at night, coming out in this individual's backyard, who was not happy to see us. And then the only way to get to the road from this guy's cabin was to cross a footbridge that he built over this ravine of a river that was going by. He would not let us use his footbridge, so then we had to like walk the motorcycles through like 3 feet of river to get. It was a mess, the worst part of that trip for me was being out of water the whole time. And you
said you crossed a river. You weren't out of water.
Oh yeah. If you've ever drank the water in Mexico and had the result of what that ends up with, you don't drink the water unless you know where it's at. But my point is that I was following someone with a GPS, and it went horribly awry. If you don't know how to read it,
but you did end up with a good story, and that's part of motorcycling.
That's true. That's true. I didn't realize that this navigation episode was going to be stories of Spurgeon trespassing on people's property and having them be like, I don't want to be here.
There's a theme here, Spurge.
There is a theme, exactly. The Spurgeon being like, can I use your shed? And then being like, no, buddy, beat it. Anyway, so to pivot a little bit, and sort of get back to paper maps, Justin, and sort of like maybe you'll speak to the genesis of Butler to a certain extent, but that's not necessarily what I'm digging at. Basically, I'm curious what in your mind is the difference between a regular map and a moto map for people listening to this and thinking, a map's a map, man. Like I got an atlas, I got a thing from AAA, whatever. You mentioned sort of like finding cool roads, but are there any other aspects of it? And like maybe you can speak a little bit to what it was like building those maps and the research you did and like how you put that stuff together.
Yeah. Well, to me, there's a really big difference because there's just a fundamental difference of what each of those user groups is looking for. I mean, you could put like sports car folks and not just motorcycles. You can bucket them into a similar group, but it really comes down to why are you on that vehicle? And for the most case, motorcyclists they just aren't trying to get the fastest way from A to B. They're out there for an experience. Right. And regular maps, the old Ray McNally's, absolutely will show you where a road is, but that's it. Like you have no clue what that road is like, and what that road is like is a major factor of how your day pans out, your experience wise. So at the most basic level, that's it. Like the question in our head at Butler was, what's that road like? Or I'm going to Wyoming, what roads should I ride? I see that there's thousands of them in this random alley, but that doesn't I have no clue which one's better than the other. So
right. So how did you go about doing that then? Like if you like what was the first thing you tackled? Was it Colorado because that's kind of your home base, or what? Like
yeah.
And how did you do that? How did you build those maps, and what did that entail?
Yep. It started in Colorado, and my two business partners had kind of had the concept, and they had mapped out a state before I was back from my around the world trip and joined them, and then we nailed the process down and actually built the product and scaled it from there. So I'll give credit to them for thinking of the genesis of how to do that. But really what it came down to is the only way to know is to go ride it. And we kind of came up with benchmarks or like themes, and we put roads into buckets. That's what you see in REVER now. And on the maps, it's like this red, orange, and gold. And it's kind of just good, better, best. And if it's not highlighted in one of those colors, it doesn't mean that we didn't ride it. It means that we didn't think it met a criteria. And we came up with the criteria, and we're just consistent with it. So we rode hundreds of thousands of miles all over the country and just got really good at like, all right, this is cool. This isn't just a freeway. It's not the interstate. It's not, the 405. Right. But it's also not Beartooth Pass. Those are kind of the extremes, right? Like 405 would never make it as a recommendation on a map for a motorcycle rider, in our opinion. And Beartooth Pass is like the pinnacle of kick-ass motorcycle riding, and then there's layers between. So we just rode around, and we marked with the old school GPS. At this point, it changes from experience orange to experience red, because maybe it comes out of a tree, or maybe it goes into trees and becomes more twisty. And then Colorado's a great example, because you can imagine like you're kind of riding through forests in some spots that might be an orange level road in Butler. And then you start to gain elevation, and then you're like, holy crap, this is now incredible. It's the same road, but this section of this road is above tree line, and it's twisty, and there's peril, and there's drama, and there's views. And that's the that we were looking for. And it's just colors. It's just colors on a map. It's so dead simple, but you can open it up.
But it was manual. I mean, essentially, like you came up
manual. Yeah.
You went and did it. Rode the roads, and then wrote down what they were, kept track of it, and then delivered that information to people. Essentially, like it was all hands on.
That's all. That's it. And right now in REVER, we have a feature called Twisty Roads, which, we have an algorithm. It's cool stuff, and you type in, you're in Monterey and you want to go to San Francisco, and you hit Twisty, and it'll choose the twistiest route. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best route. It's just the twistiest. But there's other factors to a motorcycle road, right? That make it fun. It's like it's elevation, it's view, just peril, drama, like all those things, which are hard to quantify in an algorithm. It's like you kind of have to go there and experience it.
Well, I would, I think that's a great backstory as to the work that, or the great foundational backstory to the work that you put into it. So I have two things on my desk right now. I've got a pile of my Butler map collection.
There you go.
The paper ones. And I've got exactly what you talked about, which is the Rand McNally Road Atlas. And this one has been duct taped together so many times because this lived in my tank bag. And to your point, when Butler Maps was introduced, it changed the way I planned motorcycle trips. So for years, it was like sitting down at the dining room table with an old computer that was open that I could use like MapQuest on. And then I had my Rand McNally, and I tried to like use a highlighter. And then when Butler Maps, I got my first Butler map. And so to Justin, I'm going to read this out loud because, Justin's kind of touching on this. There's a G3, which is like orange, and that's listed as a nice alternative to busy highways and interstates. There's then a G2, which offers entertaining motorcyclists, and this is for the backcountry Texas one, but like, kind of getting out there a little bit twistier, a little bit more, exciting. And then you get up to the yellow, which is the G1s, and this says the most thrilling rides, right? Yep. So like you're looking at this, and the beauty of a Butler map, I'm not going to unfold this thing. We'll get Bernie to pull one up on screen, is that if I'm planning a route, I could sit there and just like, even if it's my backyard, I could say, I'm going to just connect all the yellows today, and I'm going to go out and ride that. Or maybe I'm going to connect some yellows with some reds. So I think for motorcyclists listening that have never used a Butler map or that have never planned a trip out like that, for those of you looking to, whether it's to find some dirt roads or to connect twisty roads, Butler Maps is absolutely a must-have in your arsenal. And the beauty of the way it's integrated now is that you guys have put all of these paper maps into REVER, right?
It's true.
Justin,
Yep, you can do the exact same thing.
I want you to know that when we were having pre-production meetings for this podcast, and we're like, oh, we're going to have Justin on, we're talking about navigation. And you and I have known each other for a while. I mean, almost 10 years now, right? It was 2014 or something like that. I think we met in Colorado when that Adventure Fest thing that Ari and I and Spencer did. Anyway, so I told Spurgeon that you were sort of like a founding member of Butler Maps, and he was sort of like, he was going to meet the editor of like the first Dirty magazine he saw. He was like, wait, really? he was a part of Butler. He did Butler Maps? And I was like, yeah, I think it's one of the reasons that it's associated with the REVER thing that he does now. And he was like, oh, seriously? I didn't know that.
Guys,
so I think his whole perception of you really, really shifted. Well, I want you to know that he was very excited to talk about this with you.
I don't think people fully understand how I read maps for fun. Like
Me too.
I will like pull out. I've got so many different. I've got maps of Baja from National Geographic because these were the ones that were recommended if you're going to trip on Baja. I've got old Mad Maps. Like I will sit down and like. There's fun in taking a motorcycle trip, but the anticipation and the excitement that comes from looking at a map and putting the roads together and trying to figure out like how many miles you can do in a day, because I'm with you, Justin. I just want to ride. I want to ride before the sun comes up, and I want to ride until the sun goes down. I want to eat something, sleep, and then get up and do it again. Like I'm not a motorcycle trip person where it's like, I'm going to ride for 20 minutes, and then we're going to go to the world's largest spoon collection, and then we're going to spend 3 hours looking at spoons, and then we're going to ride for 20 more minutes and stop for lunch. Like, I want to just get out there and, like, if I've got 2 days off, like, how many roads can I hit? So, like, discovering Butler Maps is amazing.
Spurgeon doesn't have pimples on his backside. He's not happy.
Yeah.
So I think we do want to chew over some specific scenarios and kind of like throw some theoretical stuff at you and talk about navigating in urban areas, that kind of thing. But since we got to pay the bills around here, we need to take a quick break for a tip of the cap to our sponsor, Motul.
Okay, so we're back, and now I think it's kind of getting into a little bit of the meat and potatoes for those people listening.
Delicious.
That exactly. For people listening that maybe are just getting into motorcycling or planning on taking a trip or trying to figure out how navigation fits into their world, or maybe there's some folks that are already dabbling in navigation, they want to go a little bit deeper. There's three main types of navigation. We'll leave roll charts out of the conversation because I think that's a bit more specific. But like if we're looking at paper maps versus app-based navigation versus GPS, what's the right time? Like, where do you feel each one kind of fits into someone's, day-to-day life?
Yep, they all have a role. To me, the paper maps are the big dreaming at the coffee table with your buddies, so you're not touching each other's shoulders, overlooking your phone, right? It's like big picture stuff. Nice. Hovering over Zach's shoulder, trying to look at his phone is weird.
And you never know what Zach has up on his phone, so you don't want to do that. Yeah,
exactly.
That's true.
So to me, the maps are that they're pre-gaming and they're backups when you're out on the road or trail. And then apps versus dedicated GPS, they're interchangeable, and it comes down to personal preference, honestly. Because at that point, you're leaning on technology to show you, presumably a route that you have planned out. And both of those, you can do it either way. You can do it in a dedicated GPS device, and you can do it on your phone. And truthfully, the phones are so powerful nowadays. I haven't used a dedicated GPS device, not just saying this as the REVER guy, but I haven't used a dedicated GPS device in like 8 years, like ages.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're not using the REVER app, like the GPX file readers on phones, like I use Guru Maps for some of my GPX reading, needs, and like they've just gotten so powerful and so good.
Yep. The downside of people hesitate. Well, one, they're expensive, and if it's the phone that you use every day and you need, there's some hesitation. I get it to mounting it, but I will also say this: I've also not. Well, I guess I rode around the world, but I've ridden beyond that round the world trip all over the world many, many times with my phone in the rain and in the roughest conditions you can imagine. I've never lost or broken a phone. You get a good mount, you plug it in, and it just works. And honestly, they work even without cell phone service. You can put them in airplane mode and the GPS still works. I think people don't understand that. It's
that's a hot tip for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so how many people have old iPhones or old Androids that, you just upgraded and you got this old one that's not connected to AT&T or whatever? You can still use that as a GPS device. You can still use it with REVER. You can still use it within a number of
right
platforms.
So here's a question because the GPS unit thing, the sort of like classic Garmin TomTom, GPS unit that you could clip to your bike or that you put on the dashboard, your uncle had on the dashboard of his car when you were a kid, whatever. Is there a situation in which that really makes the most sense to you as now, like in 2022 or 2023? Can you think of a situation? Is there a situation that someone would say, "Hey, Justin, I'm going to go XYZ on my motorcycle," and you would say like, I would just take I would take a GPS unit, or is it just like phones and apps and the technology in our pocket is just like has made them obsolete?
I don't think there's really anything that the technology in your pocket can't do. It really comes down to like, there's some features, like Garmin's as an example have insanely complicated software, Basecamp, to like plan really complicated routes and merge routes together and do tracks and do POIs and all this. So if you're like, really want to nerd out on that kind of like over the top planning, then Basecamp is a good, well aged tool. But at the same point, you can move files from Basecamp into REVER. You can move them into Gaia. There's lots of apps that you can bring that information into. So in terms of just like showing where you are in the physical world on a screen, and transmitting a GPS device at a frequency, that's reliable. That phones are just as good as GPS devices, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that I've heard, Zach, is that there are certain people that like to use the GPS and then have their phone as a backup. So, this is technology. This is, if something does fail, if you do crash or something gets cracked or broken or for whatever reason it gets waterlogged or eaten by a bear, that I think is having, the phone in your pocket. Everybody has a phone in their pocket at this point. But I think especially if you're taking a crazy adventure trip, having a GPS is your main point and then your phone is your backup.
Yep. I kind of wanted to pivot and talk about urban navigation too, because I think I remember there's a bunch of a few sort of news stories bubbling up a number of years ago now, maybe 8 years ago, whatever, that the world's population had like more than half of the world's population lived in a quote metropolitan area for the first time in human history. More than half the people in the world lived in an area that it was considered whatever urban or suburban instead of not. And being like living in Los Angeles, obviously, a lot of the navigation that I do is around a city, right? Los Angeles is an absolutely massive city, essentially. So it's all about, just taking the right exit and then taking a couple correct turns after that. And that's all you really need to know, kind of. And so urban navigation for me is top of mind a lot. And there's there's so many different ways to do it, I guess. And I wanted to kind of like throw that out there and suggest to people in case they hadn't realized or thought of the different ways that you could do it. Because I think that, you can put directions on a piece of duct tape on your tank that just tells you what exit to take and or like tape it to the sleeve of your jacket or something like that. There's like nothing necessarily wrong with that. You can mount your phone, of course, and like use an application to have turn-by-turn directions. Another thing that I do sometimes, because I ride lots of different bikes and I don't necessarily have a phone mount on each one, and I don't necessarily want to put a phone mount on each one if I'm riding 3 or 5 different bikes in a week, is to do turn-by-turn directions to a headset, which I really like in-helmet headsets. I'm sort of a proponent of those. I think they're fun and I think they're useful. And that's one reason, that's one thing that I think is kind of an underrated and under-talked about thing, is just sort of asking for turn-by-turn and then putting your phone in your pocket. Then your phone is not on the handlebar. It's not going to fall off. You don't need a mount. You're not distracted by looking at something else. You just listen to what the lady says and you're sort of, at her mercy. but I think that's a pretty good way to get around, and it doesn't risk the phone. And like I
She has
said,
a
Are there
great,
other ways,
she's
though?
like a
there's-
great
I'm sure there's
English
other-
accent too, and like you just feel confident that she's going to guide you the right way.
You can tune her or him to the sound of voice. But yeah, are there other things that I'm missing? That Justin, can you think of other ways to like, I don't know, get around a city that you've used aside from just your gray matter?
I think I think that's the biggest one. I mean, look, staying focused on a motorcycle is, the most important thing you can do as a rider. And if you're looking down at a map or you're looking down at an app,
Right.
you're taking your attention away from, scanning your environment and looking down the road. It's just
Sure.
fact, even if you do it for a split second. So the voice nav is it's huge. And I 100% agree. A simple Bluetooth headset in your helmet, it works. It doesn't work great, I'll say, for off-road stuff or ADV, just by nature of, mapping and the complicatedness. Is that a word? Complicatedness of,
Sure.
roads that aren't paved and how they're labeled in mapping software, all that sort of stuff. So it gets complicated off-road. For pavement, and especially urban where there's like lots of turns,
Yeah.
that's 100% the way to go. People have been looking. Go ahead.
No, I was just say, who among us like this? I just want to get to the meat and potatoes again, if you will. Here, in this day and age, 99% of the time, I'm pulling up Google Maps. I'm putting it on my handlebar, or like Zach said, I'm running it. Is there a better way to navigate than Google Maps at this point in time? Waze maybe, but isn't Waze owned by Google?
It is.
Anybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For urban stuff. No. I mean, people ask that ask us all the time. We've got turn by turn nav, we've got voice nav and REVER, and it works. It's fine. Google's a little bit bigger than REVER, only slightly bigger than the 10 of work there.
You mean like net worth and the sort of net worth of the
close,
CEO?
but we're catching quickly.
I've been,
But it's hard to
when was
beat
the last
those. You're right, Spurge. It's just like it's if you want to go to the grocery store on your Gixxer, just put it in Google
I
Maps.
mean,
and put
honestly,
your headphone in. It's
every morning when I drive to the office, it's the first app that I open. I go to Google Maps
Yeah.
and I'm like, what's the traffic like this morning?
Yeah.
And that's how I figure out, am I taking 76 or am I taking, the
Yeah.
Parkway?
Just
Yep.
a quick sidebar. When was the last time you guys used Apple? Or I'm not sure if are you an iPhone user, Justin?
Yep.
Okay. And this
Never.
granted, if you're
Never.
not
Never. Hate
Yeah,
it.
so I never used it either, but
Yeah.
I re-experimented with it recently. It's much better. I'm just throwing it out there. I know this is
Yeah.
a topical and non sequitur conversation. It doesn't make a difference, but I've used it a couple times, and I find the navigation to be quite good. I find the non-satellite sort of animated or I guess I don't know what you'd call it, just sort of like regular map to be quite detailed. I think they've upped their game, is all I'm saying. I'm just throwing it out there. It doesn't matter one way or the other about this conversation. I've been impressed.
When you plug into CarPlay and stuff, it's the default that pops up, and sometimes I don't even know if I'm in Google or Apple. To me, that kind of mapping these days is a commodity. It's just like,
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, it just is. They all work, and those are the two best ones. And kind of
Yeah, I know that they talked about how they
Potato,
changed they
potato.
changed the algorithm and they made it a little bit stronger, a little bit better. But I think unfortunately, I had just gotten so used to using Google Maps, and even if I'm looking at something online, I'll just type in Google Maps out of sheer muscle memory at this point.
yeah.
So
yeah.
before we pivot away from urban navigation, which I know you guys are both ADV bros, so I know you want to talk about stuff that's more exciting than getting around in a city. But I did recently test a Royal Enfield that has a tripper device mounted on the handlebar as standard, actually, which I think is kind of interesting for a $4,800 bike. It's got a navigation module. There's and I'm curious I've never used what's the other one? There's one I got ads for a while called Beeline or something like that. I'm not sure. It's basically ultra simple navigation. It just sort of points in the direction that you're supposed to go. It doesn't give you the name of the road you're supposed to turn on. It doesn't
It's just arrows,
it just
right?
says so the tripper thing that comes on the on some Royal Enfields is it's arrows. It says basically in 0.2 miles you're going to turn left, and the arrow changes color. It gets red when you're about to turn, and then it gives you it says you're going to turn right after that, and sort of but it's super basic. It doesn't give you a lot of information about which lane to use or whether you're bearing to the right, or it's kind of simplistic. But I'm curious, Justin, if you've used Tripper, if you've used Beeline or any of these other kind of simplistic modules, and what you thought of them.
Sure. Yeah, we have. And actually, the fun thing about REVER over the last 9 years of building it is we've had really cool collaborations with lots of OEMs around the world. We did stuff with Bosch, TVS out of India, and we've been involved in some really cool tech projects. Some of them saw the light of day, many of them didn't, but it's a cool perspective on where things are going with navigation and technology. That's one of them. I think it's super simple. It's safe. It's still kind of in the background. There's still a mapping engine that's, telling the device where you are. So it's, technically speaking, it's not that dissimilar than the phone in your pocket. It's just displaying, the most bare bones, simple directions, which to me makes sense. There's no other information in it. You don't get distracted by reading words or any of that. So it has a spot. Absolutely, I think.
Right. Have you used them, Spurge?
I'm just thinking of the new Triumphs that have the display that ties into their phone. And I like it's supposed to it just gives you like the left, right, straight.
Mirrors. Yeah.
Yeah, but I forget the name of the program.
Right.
But I remember we had tried to use it. You had to use the Triumph proprietary app. It was glitchy. It wasn't. I don't think it was all worked out. So like,
is it MySpin? Was it called MySpin?
That sounds familiar. I don't remember. It
Well,
was
it's funny.
interesting. It was like there was a whole process to it that just seemed overly complicated to me. I think the biggest challenge that any OEM has at this point when introducing a proprietary app like that or a proprietary navigation system is that it has to be easier and simpler to use than what we're already familiar with.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
That's always our argument. We talk to them. It's got to be better than Google and better than REVER, and it's hard to do if you don't focus on that every day.
If you're not a
it's really
multi-billion-dollar company like Google or REVER.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. You don't have hundreds of thousands of developers in Eagle, Colorado.
That's an interesting sort of topic of navigation too. I think is built-in stuff, because I've rarely used an app on a motorcycle where I thought like, nice, this is good, because like you said, Spurge, it's rare that I use it and I think like, yeah, this is better and easier than just what I'm used to, whether it's like piping Google directions into my headset, or it's mounting a phone on the handlebar, or it's just flipping memorizing it for that matter.
Yeah.
And some of them, some people, yeah, exactly. And some of them are, that's why I appreciate that Tripper thing with Royal Enfield, and it's top of mind because I've been testing that bike recently. But but it's like it's not that it's better than like Google Map information. I mean, it is Google Map information. It's just not that it's better than looking at your phone. It's just extremely easy, and it's like they present it to you, they give it to you on a silver platter. Unlike I used a Ducati Multistrada V4S when I tested it, which is like a $25,000-$30,000 bike. And they use this app called Sigic or something, I think. Does that sound familiar to you at all, Justin?
Mm-hmm.
Sigic?
Yep,
Okay.
I know.
And the bike's got like a big TFT full color dash, and you can link your phone and plug it in and get it all going. And if you jump through all the hoops and you actually get it up and running, it's pretty impressive, because it's got like a full nav on the dash with everything kind of like integrated and built in, and it shows you traffic information and estimated time, and it's got like, but it just crashed almost every time I used it. And I had my phone plugged into the bike, and I had it stuffed into the cubby, and I had to set it so that my phone screen didn't lock when the bike was running. Yep. Otherwise it would shut down. And it's just like you said, Spurge, you're just like, you're not making it easier for me. Like, the technology is super impressive, but ultimately
I can get a $50 quad lock with the vibration damper for an extra $20. I can put that on my handlebar. I can clip my phone in. And to Justin's point, like, as long as you're using, the right phone mount with the right anti-vibration, like, you can go and
plug it in. That's
anything.
the other thing. I mean, it's,
right. It's definitely nice to be able to plug it in so it charges.
Yeah, you got to. If you're using a GPS app, it sucks down battery. And if your screen's on and it's on bright, that sucks down battery. So regardless of the app you're using, you kind of got to plug it in. You'll get like 4 to 5 hours tops without.
So if you're lucky. To kind of pivot to the future of navigation, maybe. No.
Oh, you're jumping ahead.
Okay.
No. So we
what else do you want to talk about?
Stay in the now, Zach.
Well, no. So like, if we're navigating around the city, like, that's one thing. However, like, what if you're planning a trip? Like, I do not use Google Maps if I'm planning a trip or trying to come up with a route that might be either adventure or, all right, so Justin, I'm going to say that you need to go visit Zach in Southern California. You're in Colorado. How are you going to get there? Like, what is your navigational preference? Like, how are you planning that trip out?
I mean, shameless plug. It's totally why we built REVER. That's it. It's like there's this gap in navigation and content for people like us who ride motorcycles and aren't just trying to get from A to B, and that's where REVER steps in. So,
because there's been a lot of effort for the route planning aspect of it, right? Like sort of dropping.
There is,
dropping
yeah,
lines
we have,
on a
yeah,
map
there
and
is. We have a website, and you just go on there. You can plan routes for free. They pop up on your phone. There's no like plugging things in like Garmin, but that's honestly what I use. And we have millions and millions of planned routes in REVER from people all over the world because it's simple like that. You just click along, you turn the Butler layers on, and you go, oh, there's a gold road over here. Got to hit it. Click. Oh, there's one over here. Got to hit it. Click. And you just click along like that until you have a route. That's really.
Let me ask you a question. So I've been a REVER Pro member for a couple years now, and I had gotten it through the REVER had sponsored a press launch for I think the Rebel 500, and that was the first time where I had gotten my taste of REVER. But what I loved about this from a route planning standpoint is that all of those Butler maps, which I have stacked up in my basement, are now in the REVER platform. So what I've shifted my mindset to doing is, I will sit down, and if I'm coming from Philadelphia to Colorado, like, and there's not a lot of great roads
God bless
across
you,
the Midwest.
That's a long ride, but I invite you.
But like I can sit there and I can click on, all the different routes. And actually we did this for the last couple of bike reviews that we like planned out a trip from Philadelphia to like Pittsburgh. And then we did one where we went down and we were trying to plan out a loop in northern Georgia. We used the Butler Maps feature, and it was so easy. And then you just you save it, and like that's the route, and then I can save it on my desktop and pull it up on my phone. So like I get that it's like shameless plug, but I was actually it's become my go-to planning method for route planning. I wouldn't say it's my turn-by-turn navigation system when I wake up in the morning, but if I'm planning a motorcycle trip, like it's the easiest way to find the best roads to kind of string together.
And how do you, so if you're going to go from Eagle, Colorado to Los Angeles, like you're going to ride from your house to my house, Justin, you'd like click along there, and you said there's millions of saved routes. So like if you were mapping that, would REVER show you other routes that people have done? Yeah. Or you don't trust people to do that necessarily.
Yeah. Well, frankly, that's true. We don't trust. I mean, I trust that people have had excellent rides that they plan in REVER. The problem with that like user generated stuff is that it's that's why we did it on our own at Butler, is because it's hard to know, it's hard to trust. You could end up with 27 versions of essentially the same route from here to there, but one starts at a dude's driveway in Evergreen and ends in Santa Monica, and they stop at weird places in Nevada along the way, like people's houses because they ran out of gas. Yeah. That's one example.
Right.
But like you said earlier, it's amazing the amount of people that come out of the woodworks as a motorcyclist. Like I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody be like, "Why don't you come and sleep on my couch?" And I'm like, "You don't know me." And they're like, "Yeah, but you're on a motorcycle.
You're a motorcyclist.
You're
You're fine. Yeah, you're good."
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, well, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we do allow users to submit routes. We just scrub them, and then if they meet criteria, like okay, yeah, this does look cool, and it has pictures, and it has some written descriptions of what you can expect, then we put it in. But that's really
it would be part of a community or something like that on REVER where people can find it.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. But the difference is everybody has a different perspective on their trip. Like maybe I have 3 days to get to you, or maybe I have 7 or 1 or like it's which is I think where the Butler stuff really comes into Spurgeon's point. It's like we just show you where the roads are. You click as many of them as you want and build as long or short of a route as you want to get from me to you. Tune it to your own, time frame and riding preference, and it's not hard.
Well, it's funny. I had somebody recently that they had just moved to Northern Virginia, and they sent me a message on Instagram. And they're like, "Hey, I know you live in Philly. Can you give me some road recommendations. And I literally pulled up the desktop. I turned on all the Butler map tabs. I took a screenshot and I sent it to them. I was like, listen, like, this is really, if you're trying to discover a new area, this either you can still buy the Butler maps on paper, or like just you can have this, and you can have this feature, and it's right there in either your phone, or I very much enjoy the desktop version for planning out a route.
Yep.
So,
Agreed.
So Justin, one thing that occasionally when we go on our CTXP adventures, we're off where there's no cell service, and we need some kind of we need to know where we are, and we also would like to know what's possible ahead of us, basically. And this is kind of what Spurgeon was talking about with GPX files having there be apps for GPX files where you can view this stuff. But what we occasionally do is use Avenza with which is basically allows you to take a digital version of a paper map, for lack of a better phrase.
Just a PDF, it's just an image.
Yep, and then but it gives you a blue dot of your GPS location where you are on that map. So is that something that REVER does with Butler? Like, can you pull up a Butler map and be like, oh, I'm looking at where I am on that Butler map while I'm in that place? And if not, what do you see as sort of the pros and the cons of that type of map, and when it's useful, when it's not? That is
a totally useful use case, to use the word use and useful so many times in one sentence. The downside is it's basically it's like having a paper map in your pocket, right? Which I think we can all agree is a good thing. And if you don't have a paper map in your pocket, then that's the second best thing. It's just not dynamic. You're not zooming in and like getting more detail, or zooming out and clicking on anything.
It's kind of rudimentary.
It's rudimentary, but exceptionally helpful. A lot of apps like cache areas ahead of time, including REVER. You can manually do it, so you can say, "Oh, I'm going into the White River National Forest," and you can take a snapshot of that and download it to offline in REVER, and that way you can zoom in and zoom out.
When you're saying cache, for our audience that might not know what that means, it's basically like you're saying
like
it saves
money.
a section. Yeah, money.
But with an E.
Yeah.
So basically you're talking about, and Google has this functionality as well, but you're saying in REVER you can do the same thing. You can be like, this chunk of the map is where I'm going to be focused on my ride, and I don't think I'm going to have service,
so I'd like to use. Yeah. Okay. And actually, part of the fun of just evolving our product all the time, we're doing a lot of predictive caching now. So just like little hack, if you're going let's just choose Nevada. It's remote. If you're going there and you're in cell phone service and you're in Ely or Eli, however you say the town, I think there's some argument there, and you're at the coffee shop, and you just like kind of zoom in and out of the area you want to go exploring, and then you go ride. Even if you get off cell phone service, we've predictively, whatever that word is, ahead of time. We've cached that map area for you, so you don't actually need to take the initiative ahead of time. It just works. Yeah.
So the app will be like, they're looking at this spot, bet they're going to get lost there.
Yeah,
we're going to download that stuff.
But I think it's an important note for people that are listening to this as a first timer. If you are heading somewhere and you are, I think if you are riding into an area with questionable cell phone service, whether that's up into the mountains or out in the valleys, making sure that you save and download the area in which you're riding first is a functional tool, right? You can do it in REVER. You can do it with GPX tracks in a GPS. You need to make sure that you have that so that you can ride, and even if you don't have cell service, you can still zoom in or zoom out and get the detail that you're looking for.
Yep. And that is, I will say, to backtrack on the comments earlier about a phone versus a GPS device. That is a benefit of having a GPS device. It's not that the phones can't do it. You just have to take the initiative. And with a GPS device, assuming that you buy the maps with it, it kind of just happens. Like, it's there. You never have to think about it if you've purchased the right map. So that is a benefit of just kind of having a Garmin, Zumo, something like that in your tank bag.
Because I've been stuck already with I've been stuck already with like the Guru Maps app, and I forgot to download it ahead of time, and I got to where I was going, and I was like, oh no. And I actually had to backtrack in that case to find cell service to download where I needed to be.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So off-road, do we get to talk about that from a navigation standpoint before we go on to the future?
Take it away.
no, I'm gonna toss it to Justin as guest honors. What's like from an off-road perspective? I know that REVER's starting to dabble in it, but historically speaking, what's your method for navigating trails or tighter off-road riding situations?
It's definitely different. I'm not looking for turn-by-turn directions. I'm not looking for really anybody or anything to tell me to turn left or right. Honestly, for me, the off-road stuff has been a lot of just exploring. Mm-hmm. And I have an app. I've got REVER, or in the past something different, that just kind of shows me where I am in the world as like a, here's my GPS location, so I can kind of see reference points. But other than that, it's it's a challenge. There's a lot of trails out there in the world. They're not mapped and categorized very well, right? There's a lot in different types of land management areas. There's some in BLM, there's some in National Forest, there's private lands. They're all managed differently. They're all kind of organized and presented disparately across different platforms. It's actually something we're working on in REVER because I think that's a huge opportunity. I mean, I mountain bike as well. Apps like Trail Forks are really good. They're not quite as good for off-road stuff, although I think they're getting better. But yeah, I think to me, that experience is different. I'm not planning as much. I'm not like, I'm doing this trail, then this trail, then this trail, then this trail. For me, it's like I'm going to Whitewash in Utah, and I'm going to ride in this area for a day, and I'm going to just see what I can see and ride as many trails as I can, and I'm going to track it along the way. That is one thing.
That's it.
That's something that I was going to pivot to with REVER, which is I think sometimes not controversial, but people have different feelings. Like I have found, even on paved roads in areas that I'm fairly familiar with, I found it kind of useful to track my ride, because sometimes I find a road that I don't know what it was, or and I kind of get, and I'm like talking with my buddy after the ride or something, and I'll be like, did we turn, like where we went left on that one road and we went down a little bit, and then we turned right on that twisty road, and it put us out on that other road that we know, but like, where did we turn? What was that? And I kind of like being able to go back and look at what I did and review 100%. It and be like, oh, cool. And I think for off-road, it's probably even more useful, right? Especially if you're going to go to an area and just be like, I'm going to go romp around. And then if you find a really rad piece of single track, you can go
do it again.
We do that all the time. Yeah. And I follow you guys on REVER. You unfortunately get to ride a heck of a lot more than I do these days. So I kind of live vicariously through some of your tracks, but especially off-road, that's helpful. And I'll tell you what, we did, Mark, my co-founder, and I did the KTM Adventure Rally in New Zealand a number of years ago. And we used REVER 100. Everybody there just used REVER, and it was a static line. We planned it out ahead of time. It was, all adventure, all mostly off-road, 90% off-road. And I just pulled it up the other day because I was looking around places all over the world. And I track for that reason alone, because just like to remember individual trips. And now I have that trip. If you guys wanted to go to New Zealand, I could give you a 1,000-mile ride in 2 seconds. I share it with you on REVER, and you could just go follow that and have the most unbelievable trip, because I just tracked it.
But even for like so when we were planning for Get On Adventure Fest, which are, for those of you listening, they're the two of the off-road events that we sponsor, and we run navigation through REVER for those events. We got lost a couple times, but when we got lost, we were tracking, and we were able to then find better routes from what we were originally trying to ride, and then we incorporated it back in. So I think tracking rides for off-road, because I'm very much like you, Justin, where I'll go out and just start to meander, and I'll find something, and I'm like, I want to make sure I know where that is, and I want to go do it again. Because oftentimes we get hit with questions of like, oh, well, you go to ride in the Pine Barrens. Where do you go? And I'm like, I don't have anything to tell people other than like, you just go out and start to explore. Now, what I will say is, over the years, if you do motorcycle events, whether it's the KTM rally that you're talking about, or Get On Adventure Fest, or, for locally, we have the Pine Barrens 500, I save those GPX tracks, and then I have files where if I want to go out and ride in the Pine Barrens by myself, I can pull up like 2018 Pine Barrens 500 tracks. Or if I go out to the Black Hills, I can be like, in South Dakota, I can be like, all right, well, I'm going to pull up all of my REVER tracks for, when I was out there for the Get On Adventure Fest. And I think that's where you can start building your own digital portfolio. But the other thing that I wanted to hit on, and you talked about this briefly, is that the trouble with off-road riding is that so much of it's done locally. So like, I have all of my single track maps from Colorado, like these little paper, like Hartman Rocks and Crested Butte from when I was out there. Pennsylvania, there's a company called Purple Lizard Maps, which I have for riding some of the state forests for like adventure bikes, where they give you, actually the one that they do on Bald Eagle State Forest gives you all the dual sport trails clearly listed out. So I think, those individual little like local map makers are somebody that I think deserves a lot of credit too for, some of these trail routes.
100%. Absolutely. Yeah, they do. And they're also typically the ones advocating for trail usage in those areas, and we need them bad, because it's special use trails. They're there for very specific reasons. Sometimes those are for horses, sometimes they're for motorcycles and bikes, or all of them. But that's a good point, Spurs, and it's really, really important that those people exist and that they're taking care to manage those places and map them so that people can get to the right places and stay off the wrong places, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you go out to, let's use your backyard as an example. Like if you go to Colorado, like the trail network is so vast that you need a place to start, and just having a some kind of like little piece of paper that says, hey, you should check this one out. That's how we discovered there's a back trail up to American Flag Mountain, and like. Oh, dude, it's amazing. And like you discover it all just by sitting around a campfire at night, digging through these little like, kind of local maps.
Yep. Nailed it.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that kind of touches on some of the different uses. Did we miss anything, Zach, or is there anything that you wanted to add to us nerding out on off-road riding?
I'm glad you guys touched on the off-road thing. And I think it says a lot about, the mindset, right, that we were talking about early in the podcast. To think about what like when being lost is fun and when it's not fun, kind of thing, and I think it says a lot that when we talked about urban navigation, we're sort of like, oh yeah, you can, like, there's these new little devices so you make sure you don't miss a turn, and you can do this, and you can have it piped into your headset, whatever. All that stuff is, I think, indicative of a mindset where you think like, I just want to get where I'm going. Like,
it's very tactical, not emotional. It's like I don't
exactly,
just get me there.
Exactly.
I just need my damn froyo or whatever you're going for.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas when you guys start talking about off-road, it's like it's much more that sort of like coffee table, campfire, pull out a map, try and figure out what we're gonna do, and like maybe track it on REVER so that you went. But the point isn't this sort of like spreadsheet adventure. The point, and it's not tactical, as you said. It's much more like, I just want to go ride. Like I want to be in the saddle, and I want to see the sights, and I want to hone my skills with the machine, whatever. That's like the point of that type of travel. So I think it's I like as a sort of like broad snapshot of it. I think a lot of people will represent, and hopefully have that in mind when you're riding in different scenarios, that you have a different mindset. I would encourage it. I think, I really would. I would say leave room for that exploration and that randomness and the magic, because it's those moments, it's those in-between moments that make motorcycling really special to me, because you can't predict them and really rad stuff happens.
Right. But we trade files with friends. Like I'm sure that you do this, and Zach, you and your group might do this too. But like my local riding group, if I find a track that I've gone out and discovered, because it was never there before I wrote it.
Of course.
I can't wait to come home and be like Jeff or Liz or like one of my little riding buddies here locally. It's like, you got to check out this GPX track. Like, look at this little section that I found. We have to go hit this next time. Or if you're out in the pines next time, make sure you hit this and try it. Because like there is some excitement in being able to share those trails with people.
Speaking of the pines, Spurge, because you live out there, I've done very limited trail riding on the East Coast, but I did hear that there's parts of the Pine Barrens maybe that are threatened. It's a huge topic out here, and we catch wind of things occasionally at REVER, and we're like, oh my God, that trail is getting threatened, or they're going to close that area. What's up with Pine Barrens?
So the Pines is
you just touched a nerve, Justin.
We can go to a whole other pod on this one.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah,
Spurgeon actually mentioned it in the last podcast we did last week, where he was like, "You guys, it's too late to sign the petition, but everybody, like, don't forget to keep this in mind."
So since we have a voice,
I want to tie this into REVER. So I can do this. I can tie this into REVER. I promise.
Tie it back, man. I want to hear it.
When you are riding in the Pines, it's extremely important to ride on the legal trails, and that's where some of the people are being threatened, because individuals show up on bikes that are not legal. You have to have a license plate to ride in the Pine Barrens. You have to be on a dual sport or an adventure bike, and that can be a 350 EXCF, or it can be a bike that you got a license plate put on because you know somebody in South Dakota. But you have to have a license plate. It has to be insured. It has to be registered. The other piece is there are certain trails that are, you might know them, you might enjoy them, but they're not necessarily legal. And I will say that there is an important aspect of preservation that when I ride in the Pines, oftentimes I don't make my REVER tracks public because I'm trying to follow
Because
the
you're a
rules.
violator.
Well, because I think it's important to not publicize.
Back to the theme of the
everything we're
pod
doing.
is Spurge going places he shouldn't go.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Spurgeon trespassing.
I tied it back in. Yeah. So, Justin, I'll tell you what. If you come out and want to ride in the Pine Barrens, I will give you all of my private REVER
Perfect.
tracks.
I want them.
Yeah.
I want them. I'll trade
So-
you 3 beers per PPX track.
Perhaps I'm not certain, but perhaps this is a pivot to the future of navigation. But I'm curious, Justin, if REVER include and forgive my ignorance if this is already the case, because I know as a sister company I should probably know more about it. But if this isn't a piece of the REVER ecosystem right now, do you think it would be? And that's kind of like gamifying certain sections. Like you're talking about riding off road or in competition areas, whether it's like a motocross track or like a trail, like the like Black Star Diamondback wash, like, oh, my buddy Ricky did it in 43 minutes and like I want to try and beat that time, and sort of like gamifying this sort of Strava aspect of these apps that track your activity, and people really get a kick out of sharing that with their friends or trying to beat someone's time. Does it do that? And if not, will it? And are there like liability concerns there? I assume there's like a lot of complexity there.
There is. So here's a couple things on that. It's we do some of it, not around speed or racing, but we have, Honda for years, as an example, sponsored a pass bagger challenge in REVER. It's called the Pass Climber now. We put every mountain pass in the country that you can ride a motorcycle over. Some are paved, some are dirt roads, some are, like single track in Colorado that you need a 500 DXE or something to get over. But they're all there, and you can ride them, and you can use it as like a digital ledger of riding all the mountain passes, which is really cool. And there's a leaderboard, and people show up on leaderboards. So we do gamify that and try to inspire people. Just get out there and have fun, go to see cool places, and we try to put cool places in there. So the mountain passes are one. We have all the national parks. Actually, we have a dude just last week in REVER who visited every single national park in the country on his motorcycle and tracked in REVER and got credit. So he's at the top of the leaderboard there, which is super cool. But as a road racer and off-road racer and, dude who grew up like you in competition, I know where you're getting at. And I use Strava too on cycling. I'll say this. We've created and we've been testing stuff here locally, Mark and I and some of the other guys on REVER for years. And we've actually got some really cool tech to integrate like REVER segments where you could do that sort of stuff. So technically speaking, we can do it. We don't expose that in the app to consumers for a lot of reasons right now, liability being one of them. And, sensitivities to like what's happening in the Pine Barrens, like if we put a segment on a single track, are we making it better or worse? Or, we just haven't figured that out.
Yeah.
I'm sure that it's not cut and dry where it's like, it's all bad or it's all good. It has a home somewhere, there's all sorts of private, hair scrambly type trail systems around the country.
Right.
So great. They're one-way trails and people are going fast. So long-winded way of saying, I want it myself, truthfully. We haven't figured it out as a company quite yet. If people have ideas or comments, like, hey, that's the worst idea ever. Don't you ever do that? I want to hear it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Because I think it could be cool.
Outside of the gamification of it, so, kind of pivoting to the future of navigation, one of the things that I think we hit on was the challenge of finding places to go ride off-road. I know that recently REVER partnered with the BDR to incorporate the BDR tracks into the REVER platform. So if you have REVER Pro, you can go in and you can, just use that as your BDR routes. The question I have for you is like, that back trail up to American Flag Mountain, right? I mean, we did it in like a half a day, and we thought we were rock stars, and we got home, we were all proud, and then we found like a video on YouTube with some dude doing it in like 45 minutes, and like,
what's the give people some background on what you're talking about? It's the second time you mentioned it.
There's a single track trail that goes. There's a mountain in Colorado called American Flag Mountain, and you get to the top, and it's got this giant American flag at the top and a huge drop off cliff. And on one side of the mountain, there's a Jeep trail that you can take up. And Justin, you can correct me if any of this is wrong, but there's a Jeep trail that you can do on like adventure bikes or like a 4-wheel drive vehicle. But on the back side of the mountain, there's a single track trail, and it's this gnarly, insane, crazy trail up the mountain. And it took my group of relatively okay riders, a couple hours to get to the top of this trail. And then we got back, and some dude did it on a motorcycle in like 30 minutes. So for me, I'm not going to go out there and try and compete with the individual that did it in 30 minutes. I'm not looking for gamification of this, but it would have been really great to have it, where, we knew exactly where the start of the trail was. We knew exactly where the trail ended. Is there any of that in REVER's future as far as like trying to get some of these legal trails on the map system?
There is, yep, and like real soon, just sneak peeks into REVER product, and yes, for sure. It's actually a big deal because we're all off-road guys here as well, not just road guys. And like I mentioned earlier, it's a gap. I think the information is disparate. The focus is maybe on other user types, and I think there's a big opportunity. So we have someone kind of dedicated to that right now, doing research and gathering content. So look for it actually next riding season.
What else do you see in pre-production? You mentioned heads-up displays. I'm kind of curious, like your. Granted, as we've said, you do have almost as much money as Google, so I assume a lot of this stuff's right around the corner. But if your dream, you and Mark have built this app in this company, REVER, and I know that you can't always do everything that you want to do, and I'm sure that I'd love for you to speak to some of the challenges you've had, but also some of the sort of dreams that you have about REVER. Like if you could just snap your fingers and have stuff programmed and available to use, what would it look like? What do you think would be cool to have, or I don't know, what is the future of navigation?
That's a great
in your
question.
Mind, kind of.
That's a great question. I think that our industry is lagging compared to like automotive industry or even cycling, which just sounds crazy,
bigger markets.
So I think that there's room for technology leadership in motorcycles. We've always thought of ourselves that way. And I hope we continue to think of ourselves that way. And there's a lot of opportunity with the integrated bike. There's a lot of opportunities with safety stuff. We've been involved in a lot of those conversations and some of the technology building, like I mentioned. The heads-up display thing is interesting to me. People have been trying that, smart helmets and all that. Companies have come and gone. Products have come and gone. Kickstarters have caused lots of problems for people.
Companies have come and gone before the product even made it to market.
Yeah. To me, that's an interesting one. That's a longer conversation. I kind of feel like the heads-up display is maybe a problem or a solution looking for a problem. I don't think it's less distracting. I think it's more distracting to have this stuff here. People say you can not focus and you can look straight through it. It's not true. You have to look at it and think about it, right? So I personally think that sort of stuff is maybe a little dangerous, but maybe there's other things, like lighter weight, like motorcycle specific solutions that we can be involved in and that's coming down the pipeline. Just like the simple lights that you said. You don't need a lot of overstimulus in your brain with visual or audio. You kind of just need general guidance, like go this way soon type stuff. So I think there's room to grow there. The CarPlay, you mentioned Ducati. They kind of went their own route and didn't put CarPlay. Like, why not just put CarPlay, right? I mean, everybody uses CarPlay. You plug it in and it stinking works. Like, you don't have to think about it. And that's just an example, I think, of our industry being a little bit behind, also wanting to like blaze their own path and maybe overthink it.
But like we talked about earlier, like if you're going to blaze your own path, you have to make it sure it works as well, if not easier, than the existing.
Which is really hard to do. Yeah, it's really hard to do.
The worst thing you can say about CarPlay is that it's CarPlay and not motorcycle play. Like there are some pieces to it that are clearly not designed for life on a bike, but it's still awfully good software, and it offers so
there's
much
apps.
access.
I mean, REVER works on CarPlay, but there's like, please nobody quote me exactly, or somebody please tell me the exact number. But there's like 3 models in the world that have CarPlay. Like Harley's got some models that are CarPlay compatible.
Honda,
the Goldwing is CarPlay compatible.
Yeah.
A couple Hondas, and we worked early with Honda to make that. They actually. We're like, hey, we want CarPlay, but nothing is really motorcycle specific. So we built a CarPlay app because we knew it was coming on Honda, and it works, and we can make it even better. But the challenge is for companies like us that are just slightly smaller than Google to dedicate those resources, to think that far in the future. Like, or how much should we invest into making a kick-ass CarPlay app when 3 models or 10 or however many, a very small percentage use it, right? But if all the manufacturers said, you know what, let's just use CarPlay and Android Auto and forget about doing our own thing here, then companies like us would invest a lot into it and there'd be solutions. So I think that it's just the beginning of that kind of evolution and synergies, to use business words, that it's happening in the motorcycle space. It's lagging. It's lagging auto and some others.
We've made the joke a couple times, right, about REVER being only slightly smaller than Google. But the truth of the matter is, Justin, you have a team of probably less than 10 people? 10 people?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So bearing the limitations of if you go out there and tackle everything at one time, obviously you would do it. But knowing that you do have these limitations in resources, what's the next big thing that you're excited about that your team is working on as it relates back to REVER and navigation for motorcyclists?
Yeah. We're putting a lot of effort this winter coming into next riding season on the discovery element, because I think that's the part, that people really can value the most from, have the best experience. So cleaning up, adding more Butler route stuff, making it easier to get to, adding our own stuff, the off-road stuff, even more ADV routes, even more single track, that sort of kind of content curation and kind of UX cleanup to make it just even easier and simpler to use REVER from a discovery standpoint. That's a big focus. And the other stuff works. It works. And we can always be better at lots of things, but we can also always add more routes, more content all over the world.
I want to parlay that into one follow-up question. So I'm realizing as we're having this discussion that, a lot of our conversation has focused, around, US-centric style pieces here.
Yeah.
So you're someone that kicked off this conversation with your travels around the world. Does REVER work in other countries?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
And that's actually, when we're weighing the differences between, or pros and cons of kind of Garmin's versus phone apps, REVER aside, the phone apps just work anywhere in the world. You don't have to go buy special maps for Tasmania. You don't have to download stuff. It just works anywhere. We have the entire world in REVER. And we have it in 3D too, which is actually super cool. We don't have content, we can't tell you the best roads in Kyrgyzstan quite yet. Yeah. But the maps are there, and they do work anywhere.
That's next year's plan. We're going to do the dirt roads this year, and then Kyrgyzstan next year.
Kyrgyzstan is coming up. I'm expecting you guys to come with me on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, why not? Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are just so many challenges to what you do. I imagine you have conversations from time to time with people where they're like, why doesn't the app just blah blah blah, and you're like, man, that's like 3 months of work for 4 people to try and figure out how to get that thing to do the thing. Yeah,
it's totally true. Technology is always evolving. It's it's not something you just build and put on the shelf. If it breaks, things change. Apple changes stuff, Google changes. Like, it's just always evolving. You have to be on top of it. Although I will say, if any of our guys are listening to this that work for REVER, they're shaking their head, because I'm the king of coming up with ideas and pretending that it's super easy. Like, oh, come on, we can do that. That's super easy. And all of the developers just go, oh my God, please stop saying that.
Somebody shut him up.
Somebody stop the ideas from coming in.
Yeah,
so
fair enough.
To wrap up the conversation, because I want to get onto the engine sound guessing game, because I think, from what our producer Chase has told us, we have a fun one for you today. In closing, if someone's listening to this and they've never taken a motorcycle trip and, they've thought about it, they're getting into motorcycling, they've got some PTO they want to burn, what's your closing word of advice, Justin, as someone that's traveled quite a bit on a motorcycle? What would you tell that person?
Yeah. I would say, A, don't overthink it. B, don't overpack it. And don't overplan it. Just go and see where it leads you, and take a left when it seems like a curious place to go, and just try it out.
I love it.
I'd also say if you've got more than 2 days of PTO and you have, say, 2 months of PTO, also don't be afraid to go somewhere else in the world and rent a bike and go poke around. It's really not as scary as you think. And just being on a motorcycle will unlock so many experiences for you. I can't even tell you. It really is true. The difference between going on a bus tour or renting a car is night and day, and you'll meet people and you will feel safe. I promise. And it'll change your life. It will.
You will be safe 100% of the time, says Justin Bradshaw. Yeah. Don't you worry.
No, I think it's a great closing. I mean, we've talked about this on the episode before, but I think if I listened to every single person in the world that told me oh, don't go there, or, oh, that country's is not welcoming, or oh, you're going to get in trouble if you're there by yourself. And on a motorcycle, and in general, I think the world is a much more inviting place than the nightly news wants to make it out to be.
It really is. Yeah.
So well, good information from Justin. And for those of you who are sitting back thinking, man, I'm so glad Zach said you could just put a piece of duct tape on your sleeve with some turn-by-turn directions to get around.
You could do that.
You are also welcome. You're very welcome for that piece of
You could also build some fabric into a sleeve that lights up and connects to the REVER app. Not that it's an idea I ever came up with that I thought was easy and someone told me it's really hard. But it's just an example.
So whether
you're an idea man, Justin.
Whether or not you're duct taping your directions to your tank bag, or you're using an app, or you're using a GPS, hopefully, if nothing else, we've inspired you to get out there and to take a motorcycle trip and to maybe think about your next use of PTO a little bit more interestingly. But for now, I do think it's time we pivot into the engine sound guessing game, which is
yes, sir.
America's newest favorite trivia game. And Justin, we are going to start with you. So for those of you listening for the first time, we're going to play an engine sound. The three of us, Justin, Zachary, and myself, have not heard this sound. It was sourced by producer Chase. I do have some hints that we will get to if we need them. But we're going to go ahead. We're going to play the engine sound. And right now, we're all going to try and take 30 seconds to figure out what this sound is. So, gentlemen, go ahead and start your engines.
Does everybody get to hear this sound, or
no? We're hearing it for the first time.
Everyone's playing in their car right now, so we can be quiet for whatever 20 seconds and let them. Oh. Justin's gonna get this one. I can tell. Yeah. Okay. I adventurous folks like Spurgeon and Justin, guest honors. Why don't you go ahead?
I'm going GS. I'm going BMW GS. We could say water cooled.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you. This is an opposed twin. I can't tell you if it's a 1200 or 1250. I'm not going to say that I'm that discerning, but I'm guessing this is a late model BMW opposed twin.
Yep.
You're going water cooled, huh?
Well, I just needed it to sound like I, was maybe a little more intelligent than.
Yeah, well, if you make definitive statements, people think you're smarter.
Exactly. Like, how did he know there's water in there? I just did.
I'm going on the sound of the starter engine, the starter motor. I'm going oil cooled.
Yep.
I'm going oil cooled. I think it's pre 2013, so it could be an 1150 or a 1200. I can't tell the difference between those two. I guess it could even be an 1100, but I am going 1150 or 1200 oil cooled.
All
So
right.
Yes.
we're all in the
Or
same mindset.
oil cooled BMW twin, BMW Boxer twin.
Okay.
There you go.
So let's start off with we're all pretty much in the same world here. Hit
We
number
are, yeah.
one is that it is a twin cylinder engine. So we're already there. We're already
mean-
guessing.
Okay, look at us
Yep.
go.
Yeah, we're smart.
Hit number two is air/oil cooled.
Right.
Justin, you are out.
Come on.
The final hint, and this kind of eliminates the adventure side of things, but it is a naked bike. So we know it's a
Wow.
BMW engine. We all agree on that. It's an air oil cooled BMW engine, and now we know it's a naked bike. Any final guesses as to what this motorcycle might be?
That makes it. It's got to be R1150R,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Or
The early R12
R1200R.
Yeah, because the
Did they
S.
have an
I-
R1200R? They must have. I think
No,
they
I
did.
don't-
Or it
did
could
they?
be it could be an HP2. That was sort of naked.
but would that not be an engine? Like, what's the adventure? Wasn't the HP2 the adventure one, or was there a different one?
Well, there's
Yeah. Adventure-y, dirt bike.
Adventure. It's a 21-inch front wheel, but it's a naked. It's upright naked bike. It doesn't have a. It doesn't have a fairing on it. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
no,
I
it's
think
a naked adventure bike,
R1150R
yeah.
is my guess.
Any final guesses for you, Justin, before I flip the page?
I'm right in there. That yeah. I mean, the other naked bikes. If we landed on BMW, the other ones are their 4-cylinder. Any other naked ones, So
Right.
that's.
Okay,
Yeah,
1150R / the HP2 adventure dirt bike behemoth that they built. The answer is, how wrong we are. A 2016 BMW R9T.
R9T. Dang it! I
Should
had
have
one of
seen
those
that
too.
coming.
Yeah. I knew it was.
So
real
it
familiar.
is. So it is the pre-2013 engine, but they
We were
they
right on the
continued
bike.
it in. We were right on the engine, but
we
we
were
were
on the
wrong on the
engine.
year. Yeah, because we forgot about the 9T engine, how it uses the oil-cooled engine from pre-2013 and up to today. Wow, I can't believe that snuck under us. Man.
I'm a little surprised there too, especially because
I know.
I had one of those for a long time. It's a cool bike.
And it was funny because our producer Chase, I know, is trying to find something up your alley to give you a bit of an advantage,
Yet
but also
a little bit
yeah.
tricky. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Good
instead
job,
he made
Chase.
you look like a fool, not even
Yes,
knowing
it's
the
true.
motorcycle you owned. Yeah,
It's
so.
true.
Man.
Well, I
give
knew
a-
the motor. Granted, we couldn't hear the fairing, could we? So
That's true.
No, that's true.
I do want to give a shout out to Chris, who is the individual who emailed us in a sound of his bike. Chris goes on to let us know that his BMW has the Akrapovic high-level exhaust from BMW, and Chris did say that if he wins, he is going to give the shirt to his wife as it's her bike. So, Chris, I will say that we will send you and your wife a T-shirt. You have already sent us an email, so our producer Chase will follow up with you and make sure that we get you a T-shirt for you and your wife for sending us a BMW R9T from 2016. And for those of you listening, if you haven't already done so, feel free to send us a clip of your motorcycle. You can shoot us an email to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com. Make sure you do it exactly like Chris just did. Let the bike idle for a little bit, get a good sound of it starting up. That's how Zach knew it was an oil-cooled bike. He listened to the starter.
Heard that starter motor. I knew I recognized it. Well, so this brings your participation in the conversation to an end, Justin. Thanks so much for coming on today, talking about navigation, and of course playing our Rev Trivia game. I had fun as usual. I hope you enjoyed doing this, and thanks for all your knowledge.
it was a blast. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you out in the Pine Barrens soon. I want those 3 beers.
I want those tracks.
Beers for GPX tracks. Thanks, Justin. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one, guys.
Later, man.
So great conversation with Justin, and I think one of the things I'm going to go and I'm going to throw in that REVER idea folder is that we should be able to trade GPX tracks for beer. I think that would be a great gamification of REVER. Is that you send them a GPX track and they mail you a beer. We'll see if that idea pans out.
Yeah, we'll see if it catches on. Who knows?
So we're going to move right along into the T-shirt winner segment of this. We pick a Apple Podcast review, and we award the individual that left us a review a T-shirt. The reviews do help us rank in the world of Apple Podcasts, so please take a second and give us a rating over on Apple Podcasts. Zach, why don't you go ahead and take the winner here?
Yes, indeed. The winner this time around is Levi from Missouri, as far as we can tell. Levi left review of which the subject was "A Non-Rider Can Dream." Levi says, as a late 30s male, I have felt the urge to ride for a few years now, but convincing the other half has proven to be near impossible. I dream of riding my Versa 650 through the trails and dirt roads of northern Arkansas. Until then, I will continue to live vicariously through Spurgeon and his KTM. Levi goes on to say, I know a 650 probably isn't a good starter bike, but he doesn't want to dream about riding a 300, which is totally fair. The reason we picked Levi as a winner is that Levi listens to High Side, Low Side and listens to us talk about Spurgeon, talk about his KTM, and us talk about motorcycles. And Levi doesn't even ride, just a potential rider of the future. So if it starts your motorcycle journey that much sooner, Levi, we will send you a High Side, Low Side t-shirt for your loyalty and your listening, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah. I thought that was great. And then, for what it's worth, I think, a Versa 650 is an approachable machine. And, you
Agreed.
can
That's not a bad starter bike at all.
You can throw some TKC80s on there. And honestly, Levi, I think, you can get into some pretty decent off-road trail riding before it gets to be too much.
Agreed. So Levi, send your mailing address and your preferred shirt size to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com. And we'll get you that one baby step closer to your Versa 650 dream.
Yeah, that the dude that I was following on the GPS that got me lost on the side of the mountain, we all almost died, was on a Versa 650. So
okay,
you can get
go.
into some pretty aggressive situations. So, so let's move on to the High Side, Low Side comments. These are comments that have come in either via email or the YouTube app in which you're viewing this on right now. We will encourage you all to continue. Please send in your comments for Zach and I. We love the engine sounds. We love the podcast reviews. But if you've got something a bit more substantive, this is where you want to send us a comment to highside@RevZilla.com. The first comment of the day is from Johnny. And Johnny recently moved to Mexico. Back in the States, he had an Africa Twin and a CRF 250L Rally. Love the Honda dependability. Done a bunch of mods to the 250 to make it pretty awesome as a little dual sporter. However, his question is, do I ride the CRF 250 down here in Baja or and take the ferry over to the mainland with a total of like 2,000 miles for a trip? Gave us some pros on that bike. Or he says, or do I buy something a little bit bigger in Mexico? Maybe a KTM in the 400cc range, which would be more comfortable for longer trips. His dream is for KTM to announce a 490, like a little adventure 490, much like a bump up from the 390. He's 6'1", 160 pounds, but feels like an Africa Twin in the mud, all alone, solo is something he doesn't want to do, and wants to know if we have any recommendations for him. Zach, what do you think? What's the recommendation for Johnny who wants to go explore Baja and then possibly take it over to the mainland?
So Johnny moved to Mexico with a CRF 250 and an Africa Twin, but feels like maybe a bike in the middle would be better. That's the bottom line here?
That's what I'm gathering. Yes.
I mean, I don't know. I think the garage, I think the driveway is solid here. I don't think Johnny needs a new bike, to be honest.
You're saying he should ride what he has.
Yeah. If you're going to, he says he doesn't want to pick up, what does he say? I learned from the Africa Twin that I want something light enough that I can pick up easily. An Africa Twin in the mud solo, no thanks. So, I don't know. Maybe this is asking too much, but I think you ride the Africa Twin if you want to go on a trip that's long, and maybe you just avoid the mud. And then if you want to go on a trip that involves mud, you take your little bike. Or
what if you want to do both? What if, he wants to go on a 2,000-mile adventure and he wants to be able to do it all. There's not a do-it-all answer that you have for him?
2,000-kilometer adventure, just to be clear. A little bit less.
Is that what he said?
But the point is a long ride, and I understand.
So math gets me every time.
So what ultimately, maybe Johnny wants a new bike. What do you get to do this on? Spurgeon, I'll put it to you first, and here's what I'll say. I want you to give an answer that does not include KTM, and then you can give a KTM answer if you want.
I don't have a KTM answer. I think KTM is probably the wrong answer in this case for Johnny. And what I will tell you is that oftentimes I get questions around the KTM 350 EXCF or the 500 EXCF, and like, oh, maybe I'll go to the 500 so it's a little bit better. Those bikes are dirt bikes with a license plate. They are great if you want to ride a dirt bike and connect it on the street, but they are not comfortable. I think what Johnny was getting at was like a 490 Adventure, which is a little bit more street focused. My answer for Johnny is actually to stick with Honda and check out the 450. I think it's the RL now, the CRF 450. It used to be the 450L. I think it's the 450 RL at this point in time. It's the one with the license plate. So here's what people forget.
No, too extreme.
People don't recognize the fact that Honda made that bike. If you put the right tires on it, that bike is got the polyurethane infused swing arm. It's got all the damping on it. You can ride it up to like 60 or 70 miles an hour with the right tires on it. If you like, when we borrowed that bike for Get On Adventure Fest, we had like full on non-DOT gnarly off-road tires and it was miserable. But I would say that for what he's trying to do, you can put some luggage on there. Like by luggage, I mean, you can throw a duffel bag or some like dry luggage, dry bags on the back. I think the 450L is worth exploring in this case.
Okay. Well, I will disrespectfully disagree and say that trip, like a 1,600 mile, whatever, 1,500 mile trip on a CRF 450 RL or RX or whatever is going to be no bueno. Forget it. That's like, it's still too extreme a bike. I think you want something bigger and heavier and more comfortable if you want to go that far. And I think so, like, what about like Husky 701 Enduro, something like that. Like it's a 21-inch front wheel bike, but like it'll cruise on the highway. It's gonna be much more comfortable and reasonable than a CRF 450. And yeah, it's gonna be a little harder to pick up in the mud if you do tip it over. But Johnny's 6'1", 160. He can handle it.
What about a KLR 650? What about something like a little dependable tractor that will get him down the trail comfortably? And if he does knock it over, it's relatively easy to pick up.
KLR 650 is almost always the right bike to have in the conversation for any kind of adventure that you want to do. It depends how gnarly you want to get. You want to get like, you want to boost off some water bars and like jump the thing and like ride it like a dirt bike, then you're going to want to lean more toward the Husky 701 Enduro or the CRF that Spurgeon referenced. If you're a sit down adventure type and you're just plunking down in the seat and you're enjoying where you're going and you got no dreams of looking or feeling like a rally raid rider, then yeah, KLR 650.
So, if nothing else, Johnny, we gave you some options, and I'm glad to hear that you're hanging out down in Baja, Mexico. I actually have my Baja, Mexico paper maps right here. Speak of the devil, and yeah, plenty of adventure to be had down there. Zach, why don't you take the second comment for the day?
Why, thank you. This comes in from Maurice from Switzerland, who wrote in reference to our podcast with Ari about ride, preserve, burn, basically. Like, when are bikes like too pretty to ride? Like, should you ever just keep them in a museum because they should be looked at? Maurice wanted to point out this museum in Austria that was destroyed by a fire early last year, some January 2021, something like that. It is a wooden museum on the top of a mountain in Austria in the town of Timmelsjoch.
I was letting you read this comment because I didn't want to have to be the one to try to pronounce that.
It was the top of the Timmelsjoch in Tyrol, Austria. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The point is, it's a wooden museum on the top of a mountain in Austria, and it was full of all kinds of stuff. Over 200 motorcycles and cars burned up in this fire. And I think what Maurice was getting at, well, in fact, the very last line of the message that Maurice sent, preserving doesn't always work out the way intended, and there's no fun in staring at a cool old motorcycle that just begs to be ridden. So we wanted to point out that this museum burned down because it was very sad, and it has, to be clear, reopened. And it looks majestic. So if you happen to find yourself at the top of the Timmelsjoch, again, I don't know if I'm saying that right.
It's entertaining.
Check out this museum because it's full of cool old stuff that is not burned. But I think that Maurice made a good point there. You know, he was sort of or throwing it out there that, like, if you put it all in a museum, the worst can occur and it can all burn down. And what good's that? Yeah. So I appreciate that.
And he said in the fire, it was apparently one of the largest collections of both Superiors and Vincents were destroyed. And this gets back to what we talked about in that episode. Like, if I had a Vincent, like, it's so far beyond my financial ability to own a Vincent at this point in time. But if I did have one, I would like to think that like it would be fun on a Saturday morning to go kick it over and take it for a ride through the countryside and stop at a cafe, have a cup of coffee, and then park it. But I think that keeping these bikes ridden is the name of the game, and I think that's kind of what Maurice was trying to drive home.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Maurice. So there you go. A t-shirt was given away. 2 comments were read. We talked about navigation. We had a Rev trivia game. All the things we promised we would do at the beginning of this episode. And I would just like to remind you to leave a comment here on YouTube if that's where you're watching, or send us an email to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com. Send in your engine sounds if you like, but please do send in questions and comments. We love hearing from you, the viewing and listening audience.
So, in conclusion, if you had to sum up what we talked about today, what are you leaving with? What expectations did you come on with, but what are you really leaving with?
Didn't realize you were such a trespasser, Spurgeon Dunbar. Didn't realize you had so many stories about people telling you to get off their lawn, or alternatively, telling you that you should sleep on their couch. You're wandering around on people's property an awful lot, it sounds like, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that's something that people can take away from this.
I don't know if I can top that. I think we just leave it there. Troublesome trespasser over here.
Fair enough.
So yeah.
So from the troublesome trespasser, Spurgeon Dunbar, this is Zach Court signing off from season 6, episode 8. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, our friend Justin. Hope you had fun, and very much hope to see you next time on High Side, Low Side.